Good morning, Cowboys Nation. Coming to you on this lovely Tuesday morning. Welcome back to another episode of the Writer's Block podcast. I am your host, David Howman, joined by the icebreaker himself, Brandon Clements. We are short one of our three musketeers. Chris Halling is unavailable this week, but rest assured he'll be back next week, strong as ever. So for right now, Brandon, it's just you and me, just the two of us. So there's not going to be any sort of tiebreaker in the event that we get into one of these debates about quarterbacks or receivers or any of the other things that God knows that we find to bicker about. It's just going to be the two of us. Maybe we're going to recreate some ESPN first take, some of that like banter back and forth and aggression, but who knows? You'll have to tune in. But Brandon, how are you doing on this fine Tuesday morning?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's it's that time of year where we're talking about undrafted players and free agents and whoever's left and what the Cowboys haven't done. We have all these different things that are now going on with the schedule and who they're playing. So it's I'm excited for. I mean, generally going on for me, just doing the normal dad thing with the two girls, just staying busy. So it's always we squeeze things in. I always enjoy our recordings on Monday nights for Tuesday air. Monday nights are a crazy night for me. So I get to, once I get settled in, get some late dinner and finish that up. I get to hop on with you and Chris. I know Chris isn't here this week. So it's going to be, Howman and Clements doing our thing. And just, we and the thing I love about, talking with you, which we did working for the Blog and the Boys family, over the years, we look at the game a little bit differently, but the one thing we have in common is we love the Dallas Cowboys and we just want to see them win. So we're not always going to think the same, probably hardly ever going to think the same, but that's what makes it fun. And that's why, it's, when we started this podcast, you and Chris were two guys that I'm like, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to work with because we all have a different way of looking at the game. And it's fun to hear others' perspectives and still not agree with it, but it's still fun anyways.
Yeah, we definitely do have different ways of looking at the game. I would describe your way as kind of more old school, traditional, also the wrong way. And then there's my way of looking at it.
No, hey, Howman, it's okay. I mean, I know. I saw the birthday shout outs this past week on at the family Slack channel there, and Analytics King. So, in full disclosure for all of our viewers and listeners out there, and it's always been in good fun. Like Howman and I, there was never been ill wills, but we bust each other's chops because of we think oppositely. Like he's the analytics guy, I'm far from it, and we, you might think we have some bad blood, but it's in good fun. We just like to get a laugh out of it.
Yeah, and it's all in good fun, and obviously we always have a blast doing this show and talking Cowboys in general. And we've got a good show for you this morning. There's quite a bit happening in Cowboys world, and yet at the same time, there's absolutely nothing that's happening, which is just another day in a Dallas Cowboys offseason. But of course, we're Brandon, like you mentioned, we're recording this Monday night, coming out Tuesday morning. And Monday was a pretty eventful day for the Cowboys. It started with the bombshell dropping of who the Cowboys are playing week one and where they're playing. We had already found out that the NFL's kickoff game was going to be Ravens and Chiefs. But now we know that the Cowboys will be kicking their season off on the road in Cleveland against the Browns. Lots of different storylines playing into that, one being the first time Amari Cooper has faced the Cowboys since they traded him away for a incredibly lucrative 5th round pick. So that was unveiled kind of out of nowhere. The schedule's being dropped on Wednesday, so we'll get to see the full breakdown of when they're playing, who they're playing, and there'll be a lot of really great instant reactions from that. But the way that they kind of announced this, not only is it the Cowboys season debut and it's on the road in Cleveland, they also announced that the game will be on Fox and it will be the debut of Tom Brady as the new premier lead, whatever they call it, color commentator for the Fox broadcast team, replacing Greg Olsen. And And we're going to play real quick the video. And for the YouTube audience, you get to see it. For the podcast audience, you just get to hear it. Really, the audio is the more important part. And quite frankly, personally, I prefer not to see Tom Brady at this point. So we'll go ahead and count you guys lucky. But we're going to go ahead and play that clip real quick.
I know you've been waiting to call your first game.
Yeah.
And I got a little something for you, man. I got some big news. It's huge news because I have a little something that you don't even know. The NFL schedule isn't out yet, but I know a little something about your first game.
Are you going to tell me?
Maybe I will. You want to know?
I want to know.
You want to know?
Damn right I want to know.
All right, drum roll, please. For the first time in 5 years, the NFL on Fox opens with the Dallas Cowboys.
Wow.
Yeah, it's going to be your first game. And also another thing, week 1 is back to being an exclusive doubleheader window for Fox. So how do you like that news? You get to the Cowboys first week.
Amazing. Obviously, having the Cowboys on is a huge draw. As America's team, that's going to get a little hard for me to say that all the time. I understand they were the competition for a long time. But in this new role, I know the Cowboys, how important they are to this network. They got great storylines. Come on, Dak Prescott. Let's see if he can finally come through. One of the great defensive players. Did that just slip out? Micah Parsons, what a great player he is, and Coach McCarthy. So I love covering them. I've been obviously going against them for a long time, and now I get to tell everyone how great they are.
Oh, I already like what you're doing, man. I already like it.
Yeah, so there you have it. Tom Brady hasn't even called a Cowboys game yet, and he's already taken shots at Dak Prescott. Of course, he didn't mention the fact that Dak Prescott ended his career. Of course, Brady's last ever game was getting blown out by Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. And in kind of in embarrassing fashion for Brady. I'm sure that won't be brought up because this is no longer the roast of Tom Brady. This is just Tom Brady doing his thing. Some may call it a vanity project. I certainly wouldn't dare say that. But Brandon, thoughts on Tom's comment, thoughts on the matchup against the Browns week 1. Surprised that it's not the Giants, who, by the way, a week ago when Chris Halling made his, I think, dangerous bet surrounding Ryan Flournoy being the wide receiver 3 for this team, he specifically referenced the fact that it would be week 1 against the Giants because it always happens, but it's not. It's the Browns. So all in all, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, Tom Brady, he's all in his feels after that infamous roast that you can find on your favorite Netflix channel there. It's one of those. He's obviously it's going to be a shtick, I think, with him. I feel like it's going to be a lot of fun listening to Tom Brady call games. I wonder how he's going to do because I've seen guys like that are recently retired Hall of Famers, Nick Saban and Bill Belichick. They're doing the broadcasting side, and it's cool to see their perspective on the game, and what they think. And I know, like, for example, I know like Bill Belichick's going to be doing stuff, I believe, on the Manning cast, if I'm not mistaken, and during the regular season. So it's like guys like that, you get to pick, you get to listen to them. And I'm curious to see how Tom Brady is going to more so, call the game. Is he going to be like a Tony Romo where like, oh, I see where this is going kind of a thing, and call, yep, it's going to be a touchdown to, whoever it is at that point? Or is it, or is he going to be not good? I mean, I don't think that's the case. I mean, Tom Brady's been pretty good at everything he's ever done, I feel like. So, and again, those comments, it doesn't bother me as much because, it's just, I think it was just for laughs. I think it's just more about that than anything else. I feel like people shouldn't take that too seriously. And to your point, Dak Prescott and the Cowboys ended his career. And I will say this, and it's kind of full circle. This is where I was getting at in our pre-show. It is interesting that the Cowboys ended his one career and he starts his new career with the Cowboys that he's, with the Cowboys game that he will be calling. So it's just, I find that so full circle and I find it so interesting. So I'm really I am excited to see what Tom Brady brings to the table from the broadcasting perspective, because obviously he's a very cerebral player, and he was a cerebral player. So like between the ears, he's one of the smartest guys, that's ever come around. So I think we're all in for a treat. I think we're all going to become smarter football fans, because the way he's going to dissect the game, I think is going to be really fun. And we get to see it for the first time, on a big stage, which is opening weekend for the NFL, and it's America's team, America's game of the week. You name it, it's America, it's Dallas Cowboys. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And to flip it over to the Cleveland Browns side really quick, that's going to be a tough matchup, and I know we'll get to that in a minute. But a fun fact that I want to bring up: so 2 out of the last 3 Cleveland's Browns and Cowboys games, I was in attendance for. I was in attendance for the I believe it was the Brandon Weeden game back in 2012. I was in Dallas for that game.
Horrible.
Where the Cowboys won in overtime somehow. And then I was actually in Cleveland in 2016. This time I brought my at that point my recent my new wife at that point, because we got married a few months before that. So it was kind of like a wedding gift to ourselves to go catch a Cowboys game. And they took care of business 35-10. I didn't get to make it to COVID year 2020, which is the last time they played, which honestly I'm kind of glad I didn't go, because they lost. So, but I'm looking forward to it. The week 1 is going to be a lot of fun. I know we're going to get into the breakdown of that, of the different potential matchups we're going to see. So I'll leave that to you to tee it up.
Yeah, that game you mentioned in 2020, Mike McCarthy's first season, boy, that was like that first month of that 2020 season. The Cowboys were such an entertaining and frustrating team, and that game was kind of like summed it up, because they got absolutely steamrolled by the Browns. They were getting bowled over by like third string running backs, I remember.
Dearness Johnson, right?
Wasn't it? I think it was Dearness Johnson.
Yeah, that's what I like.
Like somebody I had never heard of going into the game, and like you're just looking at that and you're like, man, there is nothing good about this team. And then the fourth quarter hits and they start scoring and they're coming back, and they ended up losing 49-38, and they're not super close, but like they made it competitive at the very end, and you're like, oh, they might actually pull this out. Yeah. I think that was the week after or 2 weeks after their big comeback win over the Falcons. Just a weird game. I was looking up while you were talking about that Brandon Weeden game too. When that was Brandon Weeden with the Browns before he played for the Cowboys, which was what I was reacting to of horrible. But
both. I mean, no offense to Brandon Weeden. He's got a great first name. He had a very interesting career, but yeah, I mean, the Brandon Weeden experiment in the NFL didn't work out for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was back when the Browns had Brandon Weeden at quarterback, Trent Richardson at running back, Josh Gordon at receiver. Oof. Although he was kind of limited in that game, 5 catches, 53 yards. So, I'll take that against Josh Gordon. But yeah, I'm not crazy about starting the season against the Browns, and not anything to do with their quarterback, because Deshaun Watson has been absolutely miserable and awful since he got to Cleveland. And gosh, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. But the rest of the Browns roster does kind of scare me a little bit. Their offense is full of weapons. Nick Chubb is a great running back. That whole running game is very, very effective and efficient. They have a great offensive line. I don't love that we're seeing this Dallas defense under Mike Zimmer for the first time against one of the best rushing offenses of the last 5 years. Kevin Stefanski, their head coach and play caller, is one of the best run game play callers out there. And ironically, he spent a bulk of his career in Minnesota under Mike Zimmer when he was the head coach. So they do have a lot of familiarity with each other. Hopefully that doesn't go the same way that the Kyle Shanahan-Dan Quinn relationship went, because that clearly didn't work out for the Cowboys. But yeah, facing a run offense like that week 1 and getting to see how Mozzie Smith holds up as your run stuffer now that he's back up to weight, and how Maris Leofau and all these other linebackers hold up against the run in this new look defensive scheme. I don't like it. I also don't like Tyler Guyton going out there for his NFL debut, probably most likely at left tackle, having to face off against Myles Garrett. I trust in Tyler Guyton, but I also don't think that I don't think the odds are great that he's going to do well against Myles Garrett, especially not playing week 1. Like, I don't think, even if the Cowboys drew the Browns week 18 and Guyton had like all year to get his feet underneath him, I still don't think there's a world in which he really does well. But having it week 1 is just rough. And I think the worst part is that we're going to have to listen to Tom Brady call the game. And I will go on record. I'm not excited about Tom Brady being a broadcaster. Maybe he ends up being great, and I will eat crow mostly because I'll have to now that I've said this and put it out there on the internet. But
You will.
I've never really liked the guy. I think he's an undeniable talent. I do think he's a tad bit overrated as a player. I think he got a lot of credit from the offense he played in, a lot of credit from a tremendous defense that the years he won a Super Bowl was pretty consistently one of the very best in the NFL. But that's beside the point.
Man, tell us how you really feel.
He's not a player anymore. Now my biggest issue is that he's replacing Greg Olsen, who was a phenomenal color commentator and just did a tremendous job. He was like all the things we loved the most about Tony Romo when he first started calling games, of being able to explain the inside football and like how things work and everything. But for the people who like Tony Romo was just a little too much for them, Greg Olsen was a little more relaxed, a little more approachable in how he calls games. And I just think, like, the fact that we don't get to hear Greg Olsen on all these Cowboys games, because the Cowboys, unless they're on primetime, are always on Fox. Like, I'm going to miss it. And I miss Greg Olsen already, thinking about not being able to hear him, and also now instead having to hear Tom Brady, who I'm already sick of. I already get too much of him in my life. But to shift gears a little bit and talk about a different quarterback, because, of course, in the video we played, Tom Brady does take a shot at Dak Prescott. And in a lot of ways, this is a big year for Dak, because as of right now, it's his last year in Dallas. He's not under contract after this year. He does have some void years that would make it very expensive for Dallas if they don't bring him back on an extension. But right now, he's not under contract for next year. And it almost feels like an inevitability that the Cowboys will, at some point, give him whatever he wants in terms of money and structure and all of that. But the price tag did go up on Monday, because Lions quarterback Jared Goff signed a new contract with his team that extended him. And that now has Dak Prescott tied for 11th among quarterbacks in terms of average annual salary. He's tied currently with Matthew Stafford and Daniel Jones. I don't think anybody at this point is seriously going to debate that Dak is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. The fact that the Giants spent so much of their draft process looking at all these other quarterbacks, even though they ultimately stuck with him, like, he's very clearly not in their long-term plans. Dak is a better quarterback than him. Matthew Stafford, like, you could make a little bit of an argument in terms of legacy. Like, Stafford has a ring to his name. He's, been a great player for his career. I would imagine most people would believe and would accept that Dak is the better quarterback right now. Like, the Cowboys are a better team with Dak than the Rams are with Stafford in 2024. The quarterbacks ahead of him going in ascending order, Josh Allen, Kirk Cousins, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, who we just talked about, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff now, and then at the top, Joe Burrow. There's a few guys on that list that I think Dak is a better quarterback than. I would argue there's quite a few of them that he's better than. But like Kirk Cousins, I'm taking Dak over him. Obviously, Deshaun Watson with the way that he's played. Kyler Murray, you haven't really seen a whole lot of him since his injury. Of course, there's a debate about Jalen Hurts. I take him over Dak over Jalen Hurts any day of the week. But I mean, this guy's this guy's going to get paid. And he's looking at, I mean, Jared Goff, the second highest paid quarterback in annual salary. Like, all due respect to Jared Goff, the career turnaround he's had in Detroit has been impressive. But if I'm Dak Prescott's agent, I'm going in there and saying, you see how much Jared Goff is making? Like, Dak should be making well over that. And that's, the Cowboys were already having issues getting this contract done, and now this happens. And Brandon, tell me it's going to be okay.
I think it'll be okay, and I think, yeah, I think it will be. And jokingly, of course, sort of. Trey Lance is still there, so we'll see. I just had to put that in there because I know how much you and Chris love Trey Lance. But in all seriousness, Dak's going to get his bag. I mean, Jared Goff's making 53 average per year, like with that new contract. Dak is probably going to be close to 60. I think he's going to reset the market a little bit. I think there will be a short time, and I do think it'll be a short time because these quarterback contracts are going to fly off the board, just like draft picks do on Thursday on round one, like they just fly off the board. I think he'll be the highest paid quarterback until 12 hours later, jokingly, but maybe 2 days later, though somebody else will sign. But that's just the nature of the business. Like, I'm not worried about Jared Goff, his contract, because is he the second highest average annual salary, currently behind, I think, Joe Burrow at $55 million, versus Goff 53. Yes, that's a little steep for Jared Goff, albeit he's had a pretty good resurgence in his career. I think the Lions got the better end of the deal, for the trade. I think getting Goff back and then, getting picks, I think that was also really good, where people were like, why do you want Jared Goff? They obviously saw something in him, and he's been a very good player. I'm happy for Jared Goff for him getting his bag. And I think this is good for the Lions too, because there's going to give it a year or two. He's going to be at like 10 or 12 again, like for like rankings of quarterback pays on the pay scale, because that's just the way the quarterbacks get paid. So I don't buy too much into it. Like, yeah, sure. For the moment, yes, he's the second highest paid quarterback in the league until he's not. Like, it's going to be something that will happen over time where he's just not going to be the highest paid quarterback. Dak Prescott will be. And I'm looking at this list. Patrick Mahomes is like barely in the top 10. Like, and last time I checked, he's probably the best quarterback in the league. So, I think he might be getting himself some extra funds, going forward. I mean, he's making, what's he making, $50 million a year? So I think, don't be surprised if he goes over 60 as well. But yeah, Dak, the more I think about it, I think Dak is going to be a $60 million a year quarterback at this point. I think it just makes too much sense for him not to get the $60 million per year. Now, here's the difference. The Cowboys are kind of, they're playing chicken right now. They're really putting their eggs in. You see what I did? Their eggs, chicken.
Beautiful.
Dad jokes. But they're putting their eggs in one basket, all in one basket. And that's, let's see what Dak can do in 2024. And then if they feel like he's not worth, say, $60 million a year, they're going to move on from him. As simple as that. And you know what? That might scare some Cowboys fans, but it doesn't scare me as much because I do trust the front office more than most people do. As crazy as I might sound sometimes, I believe in Will McClay and company. I think they draft pretty well. I do think, don't be surprised if Trey Lance is back in the mix for 2025. Again, I'm not saying he's the franchise quarterback, but there's a reason why he's still here. And there's a reason why they could have traded him and maybe gotten a day 2 pick or early day 3 pick for him. But no, they stuck with him. It's because they see something in him. So the plan all along could be this. And again, I have no ears in the Jones office. I don't have any of that. But my gut feeling here is I do think that Trey Lance he's not going to be the guy unless he needs to be the guy, which means Dak Prescott, if the Cowboys feel like Dak's dollar amount's too high and they feel confident in Trey Lance is your quarterback next year. And he's still a young guy. So, I mean, it's certainly a possibility. I know that scares a lot of people, but, as somebody who's been a believer in Trey Lance since he came into the league, I think this preseason will tell us a lot about what the Cowboys are going to do. Because if Trey Lance, albeit, yes, it's preseason, but if he balls out in the preseason, lights it up and lights the world on fire and shows everybody why he was a top 3 draft pick just a few years ago, then the conversation might be, the Cowboys might have found something here in the 4th round, with another 4th round pick. So 4th round draft pick, essentially, because Trey Lance was our 4th round pick this year. Let's not forget that. But it may not work out. He could be a bust, and Cooper Rush could be the backup again. So it's the preseason is going to be hot and heavy and very interesting, because I think if Trey Lance shows enough to the Cowboys, there's a shot if the talks fall apart with Dak Prescott and in the Cowboys front office, Trey Lance could be your quarterback in 2025. And you mentioned that dead cap information, dead cap money that would be charged to the Cowboys if Dak Prescott were to walk away after this year. What better way to offset that heavy hit on the salary cap by paying Trey Lance, bottom of the wrong QB1 money, while you're trying to roll Dak Prescott's money off the books? I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's happening, but don't be surprised if it happens.
Okay. Where do I start?
I know you love Trey. I know. I get it.
Yeah. For those watching on YouTube, you can probably get a glimpse of my shirt. It's what I wore earlier a few weeks ago. If I drink enough, even the Cowboys look good. And I'll just remind people, we're doing this Monday night, so it's a little more acceptable if I start drinking now after that. That is, I don't like that.
I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm just saying it's certainly on the table.
Well, so first of all, a couple of things. Patrick Mahomes, he's averaging $45 million, which again, like, even if he was at 60 million and he's number one, like he's still underpaid at that point. But he also, Mahomes, he's kind of an exception because he signed like a 50-year extension or whatever. His deal is very much the statistical anomaly of all these quarterbacks. But yeah, to your point though about Dak being a 60 million quarterback, even if it's not 60, like I don't know if he necessarily. If he can get past Joe Burrow at 55, but like he's going to be in that top 3 for sure at this point. And some numbers on the dead cap as well. So even though he's averaging 40 million right now, which I said was tied for 11th among quarterbacks, his actual cap hit this year will be 55.5 million, and then in 2025, so after that, if the Cowboys do not extend him and they just let this contract expire, the void years, it's 4 years of void money. It would be 40.4 million in 2025, drops down to just over 12 million in 2026, and then $1 million in each 2027 and 2028. So realistically, in 2025, if they let Dak Prescott go, you're paying 40.4 million to a quarterback who's not playing for you. And like if they did what you were saying, Brandon, and bring back Trey Lance at like bottom QB1, top QB2 money, then ultimately like you're paying QB1 money, just not to your QB1. So I can deal with that. If we've gotten past the point where Dak Prescott is not going to be a Cowboy past 2024, I think that's the most financially savvy move for them to make. That still breaks my golden rule of letting a good quarterback go. I want them to keep Dak Prescott. I want them to extend Dak Prescott. I want them to give him a Jared Goff type deal where that's going to be his last contract at this point with his age. And maybe he signs like a 1 or 2 year after that to kind of stick with the team depending. But long story short, his next contract with the Cowboys, his next contract probably anywhere is going to be his last real material contract. And I'd like it to be for the Cowboys because however strongly you believe in Trey Lance, we haven't actually seen it yet. He could be great. He could be worth that 3rd overall pick that the 49ers traded up to get and then very quickly bailed on him. But we don't know that yet. We know exactly what Dak Prescott is. We know that he's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the NFL. Depending on who you ask, he's a little bit better than that. I would put him top 5 easily. And I think the Cowboys have their best shot of competing for a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott in the long-term picture. The only way that I think they could get any better in terms of Super Bowl odds is if they acquired Patrick Mahomes. But I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
That one seems unrealistic. But I
it's
just
not
don't
happening.
like the idea of giving up your quarterback and rolling the dice on someone else.
Well, here's the thing, dude. I'll just say this. This could happen, by the way. This whole thing with Trey Lance, it certainly could happen. I don't think they're going to give Trey Lance that fifth-year option money. I think that's obviously pretty apparent that that's not happening. But, with that $40 million and change, for 2025, if Dak's not here, you're still, you're still, like you said, you are paying QB1 money, but you're giving Trey Lance, and I know Cowboys Nation's going to lose their minds over this, but you're giving Trey Lance the reins to the franchise in 2025. You give him a 1-year deal. You give him a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal, and say, okay, if you are the guy that, the Niners thought you were, and we're giving you the reins, we're giving you a shot, then we'll come back to the table and we'll talk bigger dollars. Until then, we're giving you a shot as the QB1 of the Dallas Cowboys in this situation. And we're going to give you, we'll give you, fair market. But until you prove to us that you are that, that top 3 pick from a few years back, we're not giving you that. We're not giving you top quarterback money. And then here's the thing. And to Chris's point, I know he's not here, but Chris mentioned it, I believe, last week, where it could be one of those things where they bring Trey Lance back in for a 1 to 2 year deal after Dak's gone. And if it works out with Trey Lance, they got their quarterback. If it doesn't work out, Trey Lance is what we call a bridge quarterback. And then he's a bridge to the next maybe first round draft quarterback that we would take for the 2026 season, for example. These things are all on the table. And I don't mind the Cowboys doing what they're doing with Dak right now. I really don't, because we've gotten as far as the divisional round, and that's it. 12-5, 12-5. Those are great. Those are great numbers to put up there. But I would rather be a team that's 10-7 with NFC championships or Super Bowl appearances than 12-5 every year and getting knocked out in the divisional round. To me, I love Dak, and there's nothing but love for Dak and what he's done and his story and everything. But at the end of the day, if he just gets to the divisional round or less, say he's a wild card quarterback this year, then I don't know how the Cowboys can justify paying him that kind of money. I can't see it. And I can see the Cowboys saying, you know what, maybe we're not going to totally blow this up because we still have other guys we want to keep and retain, but we're going to roll the dice on this Trey Lance kid, see what he does. If it doesn't work out, then we might be bad in 2025. And then in 2026, you might have yourself a really good a really good young quarterback on the team on a rookie deal, which then you still have Micah Parsons, in his prime years. You have CeeDee Lamb in his prime years with a quarterback that is not making a ton of money. So sometimes you have to take a step back to take a bunch of steps forward. I'm not saying that's happening, but it would be short-sighted to not look at it that way, potentially. I get it. Dak Prescott, he is the guy that at this point is probably going to put more regular season wins on the board. But the Cowboys have to sit there and think, if we can only go so far with this guy, then we got to try something else and not blow it up completely, but make some moves and take some risk and then reset that quarterback position. I wouldn't put it past the Cowboys that's in the back of their mind, as much as all the talk is that Dak could be re-signing a new deal potentially, or maybe not. Who knows at this point? But at the end of the day, Cowboys Nation needs to be prepared for what could happen in 2025, because if they aren't, it's going to be a rude awakening, because you have to look at those options. And that's why I'm optimistic. I'm not a guy that needs to win 12 wins every year. I get there's going to be years where we were that 4-12 kind of season where we ended up getting Ezekiel Elliott, who did really well for us. Every so often, you're going to have a stinker of a season. And I would rather have a stinker of a season every so often during a decade and potentially win Super Bowls than just be 12-5 the entire decade and have nothing to show for it. That's just I guess that's the way I look at football and the way I look at the game. I know you're looking at me crazy, and I get that, but that's just my honest opinion of how I look at roster composition and how to build the team from year to year.
I don't like that. And
No.
like we started the show really talking about the Cowboys. We know who they're playing in week 1, and it's the Cleveland Browns. And what you're describing reminds me so much of the Cleveland Browns, because they're always the team that's like, oh, like we can take another year of rebuilding. Oh, we can take another year of rebuilding. And
that's not that big of a deal. It's not really a rebuild. It's just a 1-year reset, potentially. And here's the thing, though. The thing that people aren't talking about is if Trey Lance turns out to be what people thought he was a few years ago, then 2025 could be just as glorious. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, for those on the podcast audience, I pulled up the infamous image of the Browns fan who's added all the names to their Tim Couch jersey, all the different quarterbacks, and of course it's not fully up to date because it only goes up to I believe Jason Campbell, who succeeded Brandon Weeden, who we also talked about earlier on the show. We're getting into too much Browns history, but if the Cowboys do what you're saying, Brandon, all due respect to you, that's exactly what they'll be. They'll be the Browns, and they'll be history. Okay. In all seriousness, I talked about this a little bit at the end of last week's episode. First of all, my belief is if Dak Prescott does not have a new contract in place by the time the regular season starts, he's gone. We already know.
I agree.
Dak does not negotiate during the season, and rightfully so.
I agree.
And this front office moves far too slow to get him extended from the time that the regular season ends to the time that free agency begins. That's why they use the franchise tag so much. And Dak Prescott has a no franchise tag clause in his contract. So they can't tag him to buy themselves more time. They don't have the wherewithal to negotiate something like that in a short time span. So my take is, 1, they should get it done before the season starts. But 2, if they don't, they should lock Trey Lance up. I would do it on like a 4 or 5 year deal, honestly, because you're going to be paying him a very low amount of money at that point. And if you decide you want to get rid of him after 2 or 3 years, like it's not going to be very cost prohibitive at that point to get rid of him. But if he hits, you've got him locked up for 4 to 5 years. And for Trey Lance, it makes all the sense in the world. He's not going to have any massive uptick in value after this season because unless there's some sort of injury that happens, he's not going to be playing. So it makes sense for him to take a deal like that and have financial security for 4 to 5 years. And I think it makes sense for the Cowboys at that point. If Dak Prescott's not going to be the guy, that you go ahead and you lock him up because, like you were saying, worst case scenario, he's your backup quarterback and he has some athletic traits that help out there as a backup. Best case scenario, he ends up being what the 49ers thought he was. And then you've got a great franchise quarterback playing very, very cheap dollars for 4 to 5 years. I still don't like that. But again, this is in the reality where they have failed to get a Dak Prescott extension done. That being said, we have spent way too much time on Dak Prescott and Trey Lance.
We'll do that from time to time, folks.
Yeah, it's happened once or twice. But we do have other things to talk about because the Cowboys, of course, have more on this roster than Dak Prescott and Trey Lance and even Cooper Rush, and potentially a fourth quarterback in Mike Hohensee, he was practicing with the Cowboys as a undrafted free agent tryout member, and has a really fun name, Hohensee. I kind of hope that he does make the roster just to be able to say his name more often. But that is what we are going to talk about, is this undrafted free agent crop of players. And we've kind of gotten a little bit of a chance to see these guys work with some of the other rookies in rookie minicamp. And I want to talk about our favorite undrafted free agents in this current class, because the Cowboys have a rich history of undrafted guys making the roster, and not only making the roster, but being able to fill a role in some way, maybe not as a rookie, but down the road. So, Brandon, I'll turn it to you first. Who is your favorite of this Cowboys undrafted free agent class?
It's got to be tight end Brevin Spann-Ford. I know a lot of folks out there have seen some of the highlights on your favorite social media sites and platforms, and the guy is, he's all of 6'6", he's all of 260. Depending on where you look, he's 270 pounds, maybe 6'7". Like, he's just a big dude, but he also runs a 4.7 40, and for somebody that big, that's pretty good. And he has very soft hands. I would call him an inline tight end, a blocking tight end. So inline blocking tight end with upside to be a really big red zone threat. He's very good at a high point in the ball, which is very important because if you're 6'6", almost 6'7", I don't know too many cornerbacks in the league these days that are 6'6", 6'7". So if he high points the ball and I'm looking at his vertical, I mean, his vertical is not, it's not jumping off the chart, but 31.5, for a guy who's already 6'6", 6'7", that means he's also got, pretty decent arm length as well. He's going to be able to high point that ball where corners cannot get it. And he's going to be the type of
way, if there is a 6'6" corner out there, rest assured Chris Richard has found him and is working on getting him a deal.
Yeah. So, the Legion of Boom will be somewhere soon. But with Spann-Ford, I did get to watch him play a little bit. I've watched him play my beloved Syracuse Orange did play Minnesota in recent seasons, and he showed out on tape. Like, he's a very talented guy. I figured I honestly thought he'd be a seventh round. Like, I figured he'd be a seventh round pick or a high priority free agent, which obviously based on the contract numbers that he got for the undrafted free agent, undrafted free agency, the Cowboys see something in him. And I'm sitting here looking at his numbers, like his college numbers, they're not going to jump off the charts at you. Like, he spent 5 years, at Minnesota. His total receptions, 95 for 1,061, 11.2 average, 7 touchdowns. That's usually a good season for one good season. But Minnesota, that's just not their style of offense per se. But when he's out there on contested balls, he's the type of guy you want. He's a willing blocker. And here's the thing that people aren't talking about. The tight end room is, I would say there's 2 guys that are definitely making the team right now. And that's obviously Jake Ferguson. Fergie's going to be the one. As much as I don't like to say this, but Luke Schoonmaker will probably be the tight end too. He hasn't shown me enough yet, but I don't think the Cowboys are going to throw in the towel on a second round pick just yet. So
by the way, this is the real reason Chris isn't here for this episode, is he couldn't stand talking about Luke Schoonmaker one more day.
Apparently, I know and Michigan players as a whole, I think we figured that out too. But with Scooney, like, I have faith that he'll turn it around. But like, this year's a big year for him because the guys behind him are no joke. I think the guy in the hot seat this year for the position is Peyton Hendershot. I think if John Stevens Jr. did not get hurt last year, Hendershot's nowhere near the Cowboys right now. That's just my opinion. John Stevens Jr. was, and you can go back to the tape on different episodes of different programs that I was on covering the Cowboys last year. And I mentioned John Stevens Jr. as one of the guys that was going to be a stud. And then he got hurt. Now he's back. Let's see how he does post-injury. I think it's going to come down to, if the Cowboys are going to keep 3 tight ends, it's going to come down to Stevens Jr. and Spann-Ford. But they could go a little heavy at tight end and carry 4 tight ends and maybe use that because we don't really carry fullbacks anymore. That's kind of a thing that most teams don't do anymore. They carry 4 tight ends, and Hendershot's the odd guy out, and it's John Stevens Jr. and Brevin Spann-Ford is rounds out your tight end room, which to me I'm okay with. I think Brevin Spann-Ford is a guy that I think he's going to be a better professional football player than he was in college because of the level of quarterback play that he had in college. I do think getting him in this offense as an inline type of player at the tight end position, he's got great size. I think he's a capable blocker. He can help chip and then get out to his route and be like a safety valve potentially, for Dak Prescott. Obviously, I could see him or John Stevens Jr., honestly, taking more snaps away from Schoonmaker. I think we all know that Jake Ferguson is the guy. I think that's kind of obvious. I think he is our tight end one going forward. But this tight end room is so interesting to me, and it's the likely spot for me to see an undrafted player make the team. And with the talent of Brevin Spann-Ford, I think he is the guy that the Cowboys keep on this roster. And I think he has a productive preseason, and he shows up when we need him to in the regular season.
I agree in the sense that he's probably the most likely undrafted free agent to make this roster for a few reasons, all of which you stated. Also for the fact that the Cowboys gave him the max amount of money for an undrafted free agent. That's usually a sign that they want you on the roster. They did that with Ron Leary back in the day. We know how that turned out.
Pretty good.
I think to your point about like keeping 4 tight ends, Mike McCarthy's very first year in Dallas, 2020. Also, the last time they played the Browns. We're really bringing it full circle. They're on their week 1 roster. They did have 4 tight ends. And since then, they've had really only 3 tight ends, but they do, they've taken advantage of the practice squad rule. They've brought Sean McEwen up a few times. So they like their tight ends. It's not necessarily that they're against having 4 tight ends. I don't know if I'd necessarily go so far as to say that they'll do 4 this year just because they like Hunter Lipke and they kind of used him as a flex tight end option on occasion last year. But that'll be interesting to watch. I agree that Ferguson is locked in at number 1. Schoonmaker's locked in at number 2. I actually think Schoonmaker is going to impress a lot of people this year in the preseason. Now that he's got a full off season, he's healthy going in. I think people are going to be surprised with him. That said, Brevin Spann-Ford does make me excited. I watched a lot of him in college in Minnesota. He was very, very productive there. You were talking about his stats. A specific breakdown. His in 2021, he had 23 catches, 296 yards. That was really his first year, like kind of playing a major role. Next year, he took a step forward, 42 catches, 497 yards. And then this last year, 25 catches, 239 yards. Lowest yardage total, lowest yards per catch. I will say, last year, going into the season, Minnesota had hired they had a pretty new offensive staff. They had a new offensive coordinator. They also hired a new tight ends coach. He had previously been the non-play calling offensive coordinator at Kent State under Sean Lewis, who left for the offensive coordinator job at Colorado under Cowboys legend Deion Sanders.
Well, hold on. Wait a second. Hold on. Sean Lewis, former Syracuse assistant. Just want to put that out.
Yeah. I walked into that one. But so Sean Lewis is offensive coordinator at Kent State, who didn't call plays there because Sean Lewis called plays, but he left to become the tight ends coach at Minnesota. After 1 year, Minnesota parted ways with him, and it was largely believed to be because the tight end room, specifically Brevin Spann-Ford, they had high expectations for him really being kind of the focal point of their passing offense, and he took a huge step back. So it's not necessarily – I don't know how much of that you can necessarily blame on a position coach that was only there for 1 year. But, I mean, everyone in Minnesota knows that this final year for Brevin Spann-Ford was not what anyone expected. His potential is much higher than that. Had he played up to his potential, he for sure would have been a day 3 pick, potentially going further than that, because like you said, he's aggressive at the catch point. He does well as a pass catching tight end, but he also is a dude when he's blocking. And the Cowboys kind of sort of need a little bit of run blocking help. That was one of the reasons they went after Tyler Guyton. That's one of the things they like about Cooper Beebe. They want some tenacity in the trenches. And if Brevin Spann-Ford can be that run blocking tight end where, honestly, Peyton Hendershot to this point in his career hasn't really been a reliable run blocker. He's got some grit in him, but he hasn't been a very consistent run blocker. He tends to get penalized a lot. I think that's, a potential opening for Spann-Ford to really make his case on this roster. And I like Spann-Ford. He's probably, I would say, has the best odds to make this roster. But I do think there's an undrafted guy that they signed as well who will also make the roster. I do think this guy is making the roster, and that's safety Julius Wood, undrafted out of East Carolina. Julius Wood is someone that, as I was looking at his production in college, it just jumped off the tape to me. He is through and through. He's a run stuffer. He led the East Carolina defenses last year in tackles as a safety. He plays with that aggression. He plays with that tenacity and that mentality that you want whenever you're talking about run defense. And the fact that he has that play style, he has that demeanor to him. He's just a tough guy. And the fact that the Cowboys went out and signed him, I look at that and say, Mike Zimmer has a guy that he likes. He saw something in Julius Wood and the way that he plays, and he said, I want that guy. Because we pretty much know who the starting safeties are going to be. It's going to be Malik Hooker. It's going to be Donovan Wilson. I think those are two good fits for the Zimmer defense. They both work well out of playing that kind of too high safety shell that Zimmer likes. Donovan Wilson is that downhill thumper that Harrison Smith thrived with in Minnesota under Mike Zimmer. You've got guys in Wanye Thomas, Israel Mukuamu, and Marquise Bell who are really good depth pieces, but at the same time, they're all coming into contract years. And you're kind of looking at that safety room and saying, Mike Zimmer probably wants to put his stamp on this safety room. And it's even possible that one of those three guys between Mukuamu, Thomas, and Bell, maybe they don't even make the roster this year, if it really comes down to it. Because
wait. You would take Julius. Nothing against Julius Wood. Yeah. You would take him over Wanye Thomas.
I'm not saying what I would do. I'm saying what the Cowboys may do. And for the record, I'm not saying Wanye Thomas. I think if between those three, if you're saying one of those guys isn't making the roster, and granted, I'll caveat this with we haven't even gotten to training camp. Lots of football is left to be played before these decisions are made. But Israel Mukuamu hardly played last year. And when he did play the year before, it was mostly at slot corner. And he primarily played corner in college. So it's entirely possible that the Cowboys are now looking at him as more of a corner than a safety. And that could even be more problematic for him because of how stacked that corner room is.
Yeah.
But I just look at Julius Wood. I see the way he plays. I see the fact that Zimmer said, go and get me that guy in undrafted free agency. And as long as Julius Wood plays the way that he was capable of, he showed he's capable of in college, I think Zimmer's going to stand on the table for this guy to make the roster. I think he's got the mindset, the mentality, the run-stopping skills. He's someone who can kind of be that direct backup to Donovan Wilson as a downhill thumper that you'll be sending into the box when you're going with a single high coverage look. You'll be sending on blitzes against the run and the pass. I just think Julius Wood, if you're looking at anyone on this undrafted free agent defensive side of a thing, like he's the one who sticks out the most as a Mike Zimmer guy. And then you look at the fact that after this year, the Cowboys only have two real safeties under contract beyond this year, and it's their two starters. Like, why wouldn't he make the roster? Pun not intended.
Wow, Wood. Wow, that's well done. Let me backtrack just a little bit with the safety talk. So, how many safeties do you think the Cowboys carry on the roster this year? No names, just throw a number at me.
I would imagine 4 or 5.
Yeah, I'd say 5. I think 5 is a good number. And you think he's one of the 5?
I think as long as he plays the way that he played in college. Granted, he's not going to going directly from East Carolina and then replicate that exact same play, but in the preseason against second and third stringers, he should be able to replicate that to some degree.
Okay. I'm just curious because if the Cowboys only carry 4, he doesn't make the team. That's just my opinion, because I'm looking at the roster here. Dono's making the team. Obviously, Malik's making the team. I think Wanye Thomas. I think Marquise Bell is still a better player. So I don't think it's the player. I think it's more what's already on the roster currently. If they could stash him on their practice squad and let him get maybe a year of season under their belt or under his belt, it's a possibility. Like you mentioned with the contract situation at the position, he could be a guy that's a future player on this roster. And that's why I was thinking, maybe he's not going to make the jump from, ECU to the Cowboys, but he could be a guy where he's, he sits under the Zim tree. I know Zim's only on a 1-year deal, but maybe he's back, long term. But the Cowboys might want to try to have him sneak him on the practice squad, and then he's there as a guy that they can develop. And then depending on how the contracts go for the next offseason, maybe he sneaks in. I think he's a good player because I know he had 80 plus tackles his last 2 seasons in college. I think he had like 86, 87, something like that off the top of my head. He was a good productive player at East Carolina. I just think based on what's in front of him, I think it's going to be tough. But I will agree with you. I do think he has a better shot of making this team than Izzy Mukuamu. That's just I think that's certainly a possibility.
You mentioned the Zim tree. I will just point out trees are made of wood. So
that is that is a valid point. I
rest my case, Your Honor.
Yeah, well played.
Thank you. The last thing that we want to talk about on this episode, besides the undrafted free agents, there's the other free agents. There's the ones that have been drafted and did their time and are now free agents again. And of course, the Cowboys still have a few open roster spots. Statistically speaking, they have to sign somebody. Like eventually, they're going to have to do something. And there was a lot of chatter last week because the Cowboys, one, it was announced they were bringing in veteran Zay Jones for a visit. And then it was announced that they cut Martavis Bryant, who there was really no reason to. They didn't need to clear a roster spot. It's not like he, played and they didn't see anything out of him. It was a weird timing to make that decision. And so then there was like a lot of speculation. Oh, it's got to be Zay Jones. They're bringing him in for a visit. They just cut another receiver. They got to be signing him. Well, Zay Jones is a Cardinal now. So that's not happening. But it does beg the question of what other free agents are out there and what free agents should the Cowboys bring in. I really wanted Zay Jones. We had talked about that last week. I had written about it in an article about free agents that they should go after. Zay Jones was on that list. And I know, Brandon, you love Ryan Flournoy. You're a Flournoy boy. And, we're going to have to trademark that for you. But and I'll grant you, Flournoy could very well be that wide receiver 3 coming out in week 1 against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. It could be Jalen Tolbert. I think it's probably going to be Jalen Tolbert. But I also don't think there's anything that hurts you when you bring in a veteran guy. And that's where, for me, I would like to go with this. I wrote on the banner for the YouTube audience, I said, this is my dream free agent. At this point, I don't have a whole lot of free agents left out there that qualify as like a dream come true. But I am going with who I believe is the best free agent receiver out there, and that's Mecole Hardman, who, of course, won the Super Bowl for the Chiefs. He was on the receiving end of that game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Has won a couple of Super Bowls with the Chiefs, had a very brief stretch with the Jets, and like most players that play for the Jets, it did not go well. And that's how he found himself back in Kansas City. Now he's a free agent again. The thing that I like about Mecole Hardman, one, is he's a speedster through and through. Like, that's pretty much the reason he got drafted, was he is fast. He is athletic. Can he catch? Sometimes. Can he run routes reliably? Sometimes. He hasn't been the most complete receiver, but he gives you juice. He gives you speed. He gives you a downfield presence. And another thing I like is that throughout his career, he's pretty much split evenly in terms of distribution between playing in the slot and playing outside. Because I don't like the idea of CeeDee Lamb not being able to play in the slot that much. CeeDee Lamb is he is, to use the pun, a slot machine. And
oh wow,
you're always going to be rolling sevens, meaning touchdowns, when you got the slot machine in CeeDee Lamb. And Chris has brought up a few times Hunter Renfrow. Hunter Renfrow is a very good slot receiver, but my issue is if you have CeeDee Lamb and you have Hunter Renfrow, CD can play both. Hunter Renfrow can pretty much only play inside.
I wouldn't want Hunter Renfrow at all.
Yeah, I want to keep him. I want to keep CD in the slot as much as possible. So the fact that Hardman has played in the slot, has played outside an equal amount, more or less, I like that. You have some flexibility to where you can change things up. You can have CD outside when the situation calls for it, but also you can reliably put Hardman outside, similar to how when the Cowboys got Brandon Cooks, he can play both, and he does even better on the outside, which allows you to keep CD inside. So I think having a guy like Hardman gives you an added element of speed that they don't really have right now, at least proven speed. We know Ryan Flournoy is an athletic freak, but we haven't seen him play in the NFL yet. And also he gives you experience. Like, say what you will about how complete of a player he is. I'm certainly not saying he's going to come in and just clinch the wide receiver 3 spot easily, but he's played with the best quarterback in the NFL, who's, as we mentioned, is severely underpaid at this point. He's won Super Bowls. He's played at the highest level, and most of the players on this team right now have not played at that highest level. So he can be kind of an extra presence in that locker room of like, I've been to the mountaintop. Like, this is what championship teams look like. Even if he may not necessarily be the driving force, like, he knows what that looks like. So that's, again, I wrote dream free agent. It's not my dream. There's not really a dream candidate out there. But if I'm looking at all the free agents out there right now, the one that I feel best about adding to the Cowboys right now is Mecole Hardman. Brandon, I know you're going to say, we don't need him. We've got Ryan Flournoy.
Yes.
But tell me what I'm wrong, and then tell me who you want instead, since you're so much smarter than me.
Well, I don't want to say that. I think we're all equally smart. We look at, like we mentioned in the open, like, we look at the game, in different ways, and we all have our just our viewpoints on certain players and how they would fit on the team and this and that. I think Mecole Hardman, I mean, he hasn't been that productive in the last couple of years. Like, I mean, yes, I know he was with the Jets. I get that, but he's never lived up to that hype that he was when he came out of Georgia. Like, he just hasn't. And I think he's one of those dudes where I think if he was going to be good, he was going to be good already. And sure, he made a play in the Super Bowl. Cool. That's great. That's kind of when you want to make them, but we need to make plays throughout the season. And last time I checked, and I'm not trying to throw shade at our favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys, but like, Mecole would be useless because we don't get the Super Bowls. So that's I'm just putting it out there. And here's the thing: we already have burners on the team. Like, Mecole runs a 4.3. We already have Kavontae Turpin, who runs a 4.2. So and yes, Turp's a smaller guy. McColl's not very big either. I think he weighs maybe 20 pounds more than Turp. But I think Turp's a faster, more athletic player than Mecole Hardman, which I know is saying a lot because Mecole is a very athletic person. I think he doesn't. I don't think he'd be the right fit for the team. I definitely don't want Hunter Renfrow. I'm looking at, like, Michael Thomas. Like, he's a slot guy. Like, that defeats the purpose. Like, I don't want that. He's got, he's been injury prone the last, like, handful of years. Russell Gage. No, I'm good. MVS. Marquez Valdez-Scantling. He's very inconsistent catching balls. I'm good there. Randall Cobb. I think he's going to be hanging out with Rodgers, for example. Marquise Goodwin, another guy who's a speedster, a great athletic guy. Originally, I believe, was with the Buffalo Bills as a track star. He could run one route and one route only, and that's just straight. He couldn't do much anything else. So for me, at this stage of the game, if you wanted a receiver, you should have gotten it in the draft, which they did, which I'll get to that in a second. Or they could have gotten a bigger name in free agency when the market was flush full of quality receivers. But they didn't. So they did draft a receiver, in the 6th round, Ryan Flournoy. And I don't know if you guys heard the video call with him. The front office was hammering the table for him. They loved it. They were very much on board. Yes, I get it. It's a 6th round pick. You're not supposed to make much out of 6th round picks, but just to tie in things a little bit, 6th round picks can hit. And the guy we talked about in the beginning is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, was a 6th round pick. I'm not saying Flournoy is going to the Hall of Fame, so don't put that out there. But 6th round picks can hit. Like, that's certainly something that's happened. Look at Anthony Brown, for example. He was a 6th round pick, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, off the top of my head. But at the end of the day, Ryan Flournoy, I think he's in the running for the receiver 3 spot. I still think he's a better player than Jalen Tolbert. I think he's better than Holleen's classmate Jalen Brooks from high school. I just
real quick,
yeah.
just to bring it full circle one more time. 6th round pick, Tom Brady. You mentioned Tom Brady ended his career against the Cowboys and is starting his next career again with the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Ryan Flournoy starting his career as a future Hall of Famer 6th round pick, getting called by a future Hall of Famer 6th round pick.
Wow, that's magical. I mean, if that were to happen, then Will McClay is like a legend at that point. Like, let's be honest, Will McClay is pretty darn good. So we love Will here in Cowboys Nation. But no, Ryan Flournoy, to me, I think just based on the roster composition, I think compared to these guys that are on the market, they're on the market at this point for a reason. They're not highly sought after. Let's just be honest. They're not highly sought after. I would rather take a chance on a guy that, let's be honest, like, yeah, sure, the guy's going to be 25 in October, I believe, this year. So he's a little bit of an older prospect, but he's never played in an NFL game. So you don't know what he's really going to bring to the game until he gets on an NFL field. So I'm comfortable rolling with what we got. And also, we talked about that tight end room. Don't be surprised if they run a lot of that 12 personnel, type of settings and just roll out with 2 receivers and 2 tight ends kind of a deal and go that way, because we have plenty of tight ends on the roster that can catch passes. So, Jake Ferguson, to me, yes, he's a tight end 1, but in a way he is almost like our receiver 3 if you think about it. And in some cases, depending on the situation, he has kind of been our number 2 target behind CeeDee Lamb. So I'm not as worried about it as some other folks are. That's my thought.
This sounds very similar to an argument I made a year ago about why tight ends are worth drafting in the first round. If it's a guy like a Sam Laporta that can be your wide receiver.
Go ahead. Put a pat on the back. I will give you that.
Pat myself on the back. But I got to point this out because you just said,
sure.
You just said talking about the receivers in the free agent market. At this point, if they're available for a reason.
Yeah.
You do have another dream free agent that you have as your dream free agent, who's also available at this point. One might say for a reason.
Yeah, you know what that reason is?
So dig yourself out of the hole that you've just dug for yourself.
It's an easy one. It's because he's going to be 38 this year, and he's also, there's been different talks that maybe he plays, maybe he doesn't, and he's looking to play for a contender in 2024, which the Cowboys can give him that, and that's Calais Campbell. Calais Campbell is a future Hall of Fame defensive lineman. The guy's had a storied career. I mean, I have the stats right here in front of me. His career, 105.5 sacks. And at age 37 this past year on the Atlanta Falcons, he had 6.5 sacks. Like, the guy can still play. And he's not only that, he's 6'8", almost 300 pounds. The guy can still play some football. And I think he would be a perfect mentor to help Mozzie Smith figure it out, because it's put up or shut up time for Mozzie Smith. Calais Campbell, for me, is a guy that you bring him in as a 1-year player and hope to get to the ultimate, which every team hopes to get to the ultimate, which is the Super Bowl, obviously. But I think on the other side of it is you're bringing him in to mentor Mozzie Smith. And Calais Campbell's been in this league since 2008. I've watched Calais Campbell play ball from his days at the University of Miami, which I did follow a little bit of university. Well, I shouldn't say a little. I followed a lot of University of Miami football from back in the day with, Sean Taylor and all those dudes. Obviously I'm a little bit older than Howman and our guy, Chris Howling, but I've been following Calais Campbell for like 20 years, and the dude's he's just a good football player, and he still can play. And we still have Mozzie Smith, obviously, because he's still, obviously he's going to be here for a little bit. We have Osa Digizua at least for another year, but I think you can rotate in Calais Campbell as a rotational player to also help out the 2 guys I just mentioned, but also mentor Mozzie Smith, because Mozzie Smith has all the tools to be a really good football player in the NFL. That's why the Cowboys drafted him in the first round not that long ago. But he has not shown anything to be a first round player at this point. He hasn't even flashed it. Like, it just hasn't happened yet. And I think what's going to happen is a guy like Calais Campbell can really, help him do the things that maybe the coaches can't do. And that's a guy who's, been on the field or currently is on the field saying, all right, Mozzie, this is what you're doing wrong. This is what you need to do to fix it. And Mozzie Smith, I guarantee if Calais Campbell says to Mozzie, do it like this, Mozzie's going to do it because Calais Campbell's a future Hall of Famer. So for me, he's still productive. He had, let's see, I'm looking here. He had 56 tackles last year and 6.5 sacks. He's not the player that he once was. I get that. Like, he's not 2017 and 2018 Jaguars Calais Campbell, which had double-digit sacks. He's still a guy that's productive enough, and he's an upgrade over Jonathan Hankin. So I just think, nothing against Hank, but he's an upgrade. Even at 30, almost 38 years old, I think he'd be a good mentor and a good depth play that can help solidify the center of this defensive line and will help, the Cowboys make a deeper run. So that's my pick. If the dollars and cents are right, Calais Campbell could be a Dallas Cowboy.
Now, look, I'll say this about Calais Campbell, because you talked about him, following him at his Miami days. He started his career in the NFL, got drafted by the Cardinals, played a very good chunk of his time with the Cardinals. And during that entire time, I was living in Arizona, not necessarily following the Cardinals, but I mean, you live kind of down the street from them. You're going to pay attention to them.
Yeah.
And Calais Campbell was a tremendous player for the Cardinals. He is also, I will just say in general, he is a tremendous person. He consistently involved in the community, charity. He gives back to the community. Like, pound for pound, you're not going to get a better guy for the locker room. So I really, honestly, if the Cowboys were to bring him in, like, just from what he brings on an intangible level, solid move. I don't think he's a fit in this defense. And Calais Campbell, he's always confused me because, like you were saying, I mean, he's a big dude. He's tall, he's big, plays between 280 and 300, depending on kind of the team.
Yeah.
But he also, like, he doesn't just play inside and he doesn't just play on the edge. He really moves around. Like, he'll play on the edge a good amount one year, and then the next year he plays most of his snaps inside of the 3 technique. Next year he's playing mostly at like a 4 technique or a 5. When he was in Jacksonville, he was playing almost exclusively on the edge in that defense, and that's like kind of a typical 4-3 defensive scheme where you would expect a guy of his size to be on the inside. So I don't understand how defensive coordinators have used him, even when he's been productive. But I also just, knowing Mike Zimmer and his scheme, like, generally speaking, you're going to have your pass rushing defensive tackle, you're going to have your run stuffing defensive tackle, your Linval Joseph, if you might. I think Mozzie Smith very clearly fits into that Linval Joseph run stuffer type, with Justin Rogers as the main backup. Maybe Carl Davis takes that spot instead. I think Osa Odighizuwa very clearly is your top interior pass rushing defensive tackle. I'm curious to see what they do with Chauncey Golston, because they were kind of moving him to defensive tackle. Does he move back to edge now? They need some edge depth. Who knows? But, and then Viliami Fihoko, who was an edge in college but was kind of a tweener, and they started to move him to defensive tackle. But I don't know how much Calais Campbell plays if you're slotting him in at a defensive tackle spot. And if you're bringing him in and he's going to play edge, again, where's he playing? Because DeMarcus Lawrence is going to play a lot. Micah Parsons is going to play a lot.
He won't play.
Marcus Lawrence is coming off the field. You want Marshawn Nealon to be in there because you want to know what you got in him. And you've got Sam Williams too, who already doesn't get enough playing time.
He plays on the interior. He plays on the interior, and I think he's got the capability still at his at 37, almost 38, where he can not only take the Mozzie Smith role and be a really good run stuffer, because he did do that with the Falcons as well as the Ravens in the past couple of years. But he also, with 6.5 sacks, can clearly play the Osa Odighizuwa spot. If Osa's needs a little burn, you could bring Calais. Like, who wouldn't want to bring Calais Campbell off the bench if Osa needs a blow to be in the middle of that defense to to be a pass rushing, interior defensive lineman. He does both things, and that's why I think he would be a really good fit. I think he would be. And you already mentioned the intangible part. Like, he checks all the boxes for me. Like, he has that wisdom that not many guys have right now, and that's he's old enough to be a coach, but he's still playing at a high level or high enough level to be considered for this, for the position for, on the Cowboys or even on the Kansas City Chiefs. I even heard the Kansas City Chiefs were looking at him to bring in with Chris Jones. Like, that would be nasty. I think if you can get him for the right price, and I think you can at this point, if the price is halfway decent, I would bring him in on a 1-year deal. I mean, I think it makes too much sense. And you're helping Mozzie Smith as well. And that's what you want. Like, Mozzie Smith has not done anything for me, in my opinion, to make me feel great about that pick just a couple years ago. Like, he just hasn't. And I think a guy like Calais Campbell, who's going to be in the trenches with him, who's also could also be his mentor and, do all the other things, could show him things that maybe not your typical coaching staff can do, because Calais is on the field still. And I think there's a different mentality where if you're in the trenches together on the field, where I think, they could be next to each other on that defensive line. Mozzie makes a mistake and Calais is right there being like, hey, dude, next time slide over this way, or, maybe spin off here. Like, he'll give little tips that he's in the huddle with. And I think that's the stuff that Mozzie needs right now, because there's no real veteran in that room right now. And I think that's what he needs right now, is he needs that veteran presence. Ose is a different player than Mozzie. And I think Calais Campbell is a guy that can do it all. And I think he can really mentor Calais Campbell can really mentor Mozzie Smith into the player that we all hope he can be, which would make us feel better about that first round pick a few years ago.
Some might argue the veteran of that defensive line room is Greg Ellis. Newly hired as the assistant defensive line coach.
Sure. I mean, yes. He's also the guy that was picked besides Randy Moss, but that's neither here nor there back in 98. Nothing against Greg Ellis. I respect what Greg Ellis has done for the league, but I would rather, yes, that's a good thing to have. Obviously, Greg played at a high level with the Cowboys, and he played in the league for a while. But if you have a guy that's in the trenches with you, currently on the field with you, and sees it from a different perspective, like Calais has and will if he was on the Cowboys, I think that's invaluable for Mozzie Smith's development. I think you pair that up with a Greg Ellis and the rest of the coaching staff, I think Mozzie Smith could turn into a player that people are happy about the Cowboys drafting as a first-round pick just a few years ago. I think the Calais Campbell move is not only just a talent thing, but it's also a development of younger players.
Well, you make some good points. I did say, again, just for the record, if they brought Calais Campbell in, I'm not upset. Like, it's a solid ad. I just don't see the fit. I don't think he makes sense in a Mike Zimmer defense. But also, if the Cowboys bring him in, I'm sure Mike Zimmer has given his opinion, and it would be strange if they brought him in and he wasn't a fit.
Sure.
But I think we started the show talking about how we have differing opinions. We see the game a little bit differently. So if given the choice between Mecole Hardman and Calais Campbell at this point, I think even with all the disagreement, we would both agree, get Dak Prescott signed first and foremost.
No. No.
Okay.
I agree with that.
That's it for our show.
No, in all seriousness, one last thing. I love Dak Prescott, but the Cowboys have been playing chicken with this, and I think, like you mentioned, if they don't make a deal by September, he's gone. And that's where I'll leave it. And like I said in the show, don't be surprised if Trey Lance is the guy in 2025. Like it, love it, hate it, whatever. It's a possibility.
Hate it. Well, anyway, that's our show. Go enjoy your Tuesday. Hopefully we filled you with some optimism. But we'll be back next week to bring more warm fuzzies to Cowboys Nation, as always. and we'll be joined by Chris Halling as well.
Hopefully
in lieu of Chris Halling, and for the icebreaker, the Flournoy boy, Brandon Clements, David Howman here, signing off for the writer's block. And remember, whether it's Dak Prescott or Trey Lance or Mike Hohensee, go Cowboys.